Welcome to the Daily Bitch, where a white woman who detests the government tells you how the United States really is. Don't like what you're hearing? Well, as far as I'm concerned,
fuck you. War.
So here's what's really frosting my ass right now. Why did that mom in Georgia get arrested for letting her 11-year-old walk less than 1 mile into town? You think that's bad? It gets even worse. Authorities have offered her to drop all the charges if she agrees to a safety plan. Here's the thing. That plan requires the mother to delegate a safety person to be a knowing participant and guardian when she leaves the house. That plan would also require the mom to agree to electronic tracking. She would need to download an app on her son's cell phone and monitor his location. Now, all of this crap comes after the Department of Family and Children's Services interviewed the son at his school and then also made a house visit. The caseworker said nothing was awry, but they're still requiring her to agree to these terms. The mom is refusing to do so. But can you blame her? He was 11 and he walked less than a mile into town, a town of less than 370 people. He goes to school all day, probably rides the school bus. He's around strangers that the mother has no idea who they are, but we should trust it because they're bureaucrats, because it's at the public school system. This is no different than the mother trusting her son to be able to walk to town or trusting her neighbors and fellow townies. I mean, there are kids out there right now that are being abused and neglected, and the local police are focusing on a kid taking a walk. Gotta hand it to cops. They really go after the bad guys. Probably too busy stuffing their face with a donut to realize they look like complete holes in this scenario. And furthermore, why is it even possible for the Department of Family and Children's Services to require a parent to download a tracking app? I mean, there's other families out there in that town right now that don't have to have that app, that have kids of that same age. So because he took a walk one time, she has to track her son? And in what circumstance will Children's Services decide to apply this to all the other families? You know, the left may say defund the police, but really, we ought to defund Children's Services. A cruise line in Florida is offering a 4-year cruise to people wanting to escape the Trump administration. It's called the 4-year Skip Forward. The Villa V Residences is also offering shorter packages, such as the 1-year Escape from Reality, the 2-year Midterm Selection, and the 3-year Everywhere But Home. These electoral victims will sail to 425 ports across 140 countries. And hey, the 4-year Skip Forward only costs $40,000 a year. For those of you out there trying to do the math, that's $160,000 for a 4-year cruise. What type of first world problems do these people think that they have, that they got to escape the freest country in the world to go on a luxurious cruise? To be able to even afford that, you had to have done pretty well for yourself so far, and somehow you managed to make it out of the first Trump administration. I think you'll be okay. Sweden is sending its 5 million citizens pamphlets to prepare for war of any kind. Civil Defense Minister Carl Oskar Bolin announced that the global context has changed, thus telling citizens it's time to update preparedness plans. The pamphlet states, quote, "An insecure world requires preparedness. The military threat to Sweden has increased, and we must prepare for the worst, an armed attack." It also warns citizens the attack may be nuclear, biological, or chemical, but in any case, they should, quote, "take cover in the same way as in an air attack." Everyone is being advised to prepare both mentally and logistically for war. These little yellow books also say that Sweden will never give up. It implies that misinformation is to be expected and that anything they hear about Sweden's surrender is, quote, false. Finland and Norway also sent similar booklets to citizens to ensure preparedness against an attack. Why all the fuss? Well, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia has scared everyone. In 2022, Sweden finally decided to join NATO, a U.S.-led military alliance. And don't worry, President Biden is on top of all of it. Forget that you saw him wearing sunglasses and wandering off into the Amazon forest. Yes, that is the president of the free world. You think he's got our back or anybody's back in the case of a nuclear war? I don't think so. The Pentagon has failed its financial statement audit for the 7th consecutive time. The Pentagon oversees nearly $3.8 trillion in assets and nearly $4 trillion in liabilities. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said about the matter, quote, "There are several areas where we need to work harder and achieve better results." Well, slap my ass and call me a libertarian, but that isn't a good enough answer after 7 failures in a row. But don't worry, the Pentagon says it will focus really hard on addressing all these issues and try again to meet the next deadline so they can get an unmodified opinion and get a clear audit. When is that deadline? 2028. Yep, 4 years. Now, I say if the Pentagon fails their audit and gets away with it, then I think the IRS should suspend all audits of taxpayers until the issue is resolved. Why are the people held accountable to the government for their taxes, but the government isn't held accountable to the people for spending it? What if you were audited 7 years in a row and failed every time, having massive gaps in your filings? Do you think if you promised to get better and get your act together in 4 years, the IRS would say, "Okay, sounds good, see it same time next year"? Hell no. You'd be locked up and the key would be thrown away. You wouldn't have made it past the first failed audit. What I want to know is, what has Secretary Austin been doing? Napping on the job? If the books are this messed up, then who was doing what to them when Austin went missing earlier in the year? Remember that? Remember how the Biden administration acted like there was nothing to see? Maybe, just maybe, if the guy in charge can't bother to show up for work and verify his whereabouts, then maybe it's time to sack him. Or at least get concerned about what everybody else is doing. If the cat is away, the mice will play, you know? The audit noted that the Pentagon has a fund balance of more than $850 billion. Think about that. He has more than $800 billion that he controls, but he can't manage to give accurate financial statements. In no way in any business would this be allowed. But as the old saying goes, it's good enough for government work. Breaking news. Kids need 2 parents. A review of cities in Ohio by Zill found that there was much higher crime rate in cities where single-parent households were dominant. For example, in Springfield, Ohio, 44% of mothers were married. Cleveland, 33%, Youngstown, 32%, and Cincinnati, 46%. Compare that to cities like Cleveland Heights, where 63% of mothers were married, or New Albany, Ohio, where it's nearly 91%. Now, if we take these exact cities and compare them to crime data, it is jarring. In Springfield, there are nearly 1,300 incidents of violent crime reported per 100,000 residents. In Cleveland, nearly 1,900, in Cincinnati, 800, in Youngstown, nearly 700. Again, compare this to Cleveland Heights, where the reported incidents are just 267, and New Albany, where it's just 99. Too many government programs give financial benefits to broken homes, rewarding single motherhood. If we really want to do something about crime, instead of defunding the police, maybe we should defund single mothers. COVID boosters are bonkers. The COVID-19 vaccine antibodies decline rapidly, according to a new study by Emory University. Why? Well, unlike the regular influenza and tetanus vaccines, which produce long-living plasma cells, these mRNA vaccines produce only short-lived plasma cells that don't last very long before eventually dying off. So when Biden said that you can't get COVID if you get the vaccine, I guess he was wrong, or maybe just lying. Remember all that pandemic of the unvaccinated crap? Yeah, looks like they're going to have to eat crow now. And what about all that trust the science? Where's the mainstream media when it comes to reporting this science? Or does it not count because it doesn't support their political opinion? But it gets better, way better. You know that coworker, friend, or family member that just kept getting boosters all the time because they thought it was their civic duty and they cared more about the world? Well, you can tell old Booster Betty that she just got jabbed for the fun of it. You see, all those boosters that were recommended to update the vaccine aren't doing their job. According to Dr. Joseph Varon, quote, "These findings reinforce the fact that boosters are not really working at this point." He says all it does is, quote, "temporarily restore protection by increasing circulating antibodies and memory immune cells." Question: who's going to tell AARP they were wrong when they demanded nursing homes require COVID boosters? Are they going to pay for any negative side effects that caused? Are they going to apologize to seniors for prioritizing their virtue signaling and PCBS over their safety and health? What about all the people who lost their jobs for refusing a vaccine mandate or declining a booster? What about all the soldiers that were discharged for refusing vaccine mandates? This is just another oopsie by the Biden administration that will go unchecked by the mainstream media. Hopefully, Hopefully, Kennedy can put down his Big Mac long enough and leave the cool kids table for a few minutes to actually do something as Health and Human Services Secretary. But I won't hold my breath. Grocery prices have skyrocketed by 20% since 4 years ago. This is the steepest inflation since the 70s, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The Census Bureau estimates that the average American household is spending nearly $270 per week on groceries. That's more than $1,000 a month. The region with the lowest grocery store prices is the Midwest. That's because these states' economies are linked to farming and food production, helping to keep costs down. Instead of throwing concerts and having a powwow with Oprah, Kamala should have paid attention to political history and realized that for this election, it's the economy, stupid. Now that you know where we've been, find out where we're going. Tune in to Ladies Love Politics, where you can stay informed without going insane.